and welcome to this new episode of the Love Procurement Podcast. My name is Kelly Barner, and I'll be your host for this conversation. Today, I'm glad to welcome two guests that have a really interesting backstory. I'm glad to welcome Arnaud Malarde and Jarrod McAdoo, both members of the Ivalua marketing team. So hi, Arnaud. Hi, Jarrod. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Kelly.
Now, Jarrod, let me start with you. So we're going to get in a little bit to your professional journey as we go through the conversation today and some of what you've learned from it. But talk just a little bit generally about what you do now and maybe your professional journey up to this point.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So right now I'm a director of product marketing over at Ivalua. So Arnaud and I work on the same team. We work together. We all have some general knowledge across the solution, but we do have some very specific modules we look at. For example, I emphasize on our supplier relationship modules. I also focus on spend analysis and our analytics solutions as well. And then we also have some expertise that we focus on is for some of our vertical solutions. Like I work for public sector procurement. So what I do in that standpoint is we research market trends, we work with our customers, and then we come up with the right use cases and sales content, working collaboratively with our sales team and our solution consultants to make sure we're addressing the right pain points for the market.
Now, Jarrod, we always ask everybody this question. It's right on theme. What is something that you love about procurement?
Yeah, the thing I love most about procurement is it can be a new adventure every day. Really, when you have the opportunity to buy so many things, it's really your own journey on what you can learn as you're going through that. You can obviously be very transactional to get things done, and you're asked to buy something, you go buy it. But you really do have the opportunity, if somebody brings you a requirement, to really start learning about what we're trying to solve, what the product or service I'm buying, what affects that. So if you're really interested in making sure that keeping your mind challenged, learning new things, that gives you the opportunity to do it. It's something different every day. Not always something different in a great way every day, but it is something different.
I was just thinking that some days the surprises are better than others. Arnaud, similar question for you. What is your current focus at Ivalua?
So pretty much the same as Jarrod, but I like also to highlight other types of the parts of the job because we are one way of information. We create content for the salespeople to explain the product to the customers, but we also take the feedback from the field. So the salespeople, the customers, the prospects, we look at competition, as Jarrod said, and we try to embed this into the product roadmap. So we also have this ability to take the information from outside and try to embed it in the product, shape basically the roadmap of the product. And that's also a big aspect of our job, and I like it very, very much. And specifically, as Jarrod said, he's Mr. Analytics and Supply Relationship Management. And as for myself, I'm Mr. P2P, e-procurement, and financial services when it comes to sectors.
Well, it's probably a good thing that this is coming up now that we've started recording, because if we had discussed this before, I would have made you both change the labels for anybody that's watching video. I would have made you put Mr. Spend Analytics and Mr. P2P. That would be interesting. We'll have to do name tags if I have you guys back on. And Arnaud, what's something that you love about procurement?
So what I like, it's pretty much also like Jarrod, what I would call it's diversity, because when you take procurement, it's very different if you buy direct material or if you are into indirect spend, for instance. It's different if you work in manufacturing industry or in a bank. It's different if you're in Japan or in the US. I just remember once I had this workshop with different colleagues of mine when I was working in procurement, and there was a buyer from Japan and there was a buyer from the US, and they had totally different practices. The Japanese woman would say, "Oh, we barely do contracts because our economy and our business affairs work on relationship and trust basis." And the American woman said, "Oh, I would do a contract with my mother, and I would sue her for not for breaching the contract and not complying with the clauses." So it's very different in terms of where you are and what kind of job you do every day.
That is absolutely true. Now, as we sort of start to transition to our focus, there's something really interesting that actually all three of us have in common. Depending on the perspective, all three of us made the decision to go to the dark side. So we were all procurement practitioners who, at some point in our careers, made the decision to work for solution providers. I've now popped out on the other side and I'm back pure content creation. But I can certainly remember the days, and someone literally said to me, I can't believe you're going to the dark side. But I think that there's a lot of benefit in having been on multiple sides of procurement. So, Arnaud, let me stay with you. How did people respond to your decision at the time to leave a practitioner role and join the Ivalua team?
So they did talk about a dark side, but sometimes it's because I think they have this reaction because first, when you look at the procurement community, although it's a very diverse job on an everyday basis, you could imagine yourself doing marketing, HR, or finance afterwards. In the end, not so many procurement people change job, and most of them remain within the boundaries of procurement. And so there might be, I don't know, maybe a mistrust against the other types of jobs, and not seeing that also, technology. A lot of procurement people, they work with outdated technologies, and so there is also this kind of oh, I don't trust the technologies, and then you're going to work with a technology provider. So there might be that might be the explanation for the dark side of things.
Yeah. Now, out of curiosity, and we can be approximate here, how long was it since you switched from procurement practitioner here to the dark side?
5 years, actually. It's been
Okay.
5 years, but I don't regret a thing. It's been 5 very interesting years, and I'm not working in procurement anymore, but I'm still working for procurement and with procurement, and I think it's still enriching for me and also for the procurement community.
Absolutely. Well, and it is interesting. And part of why I ask about the timeline is procurement's always changing. And I do think in the last few years, we've seen an improvement around the philosophy of partnering with suppliers versus having it be adversarial. You can certainly see where, depending on the culture of the organization that you work for, going to be part of any supplier, why on earth would you want to do that, right? But as we get more relational and more collegial working with these suppliers, maybe it makes the dark side and the light side a little bit closer together. Now, Jarrod, how about you? What went into your decision to switch to the dark side, and how did the people you worked with at the time respond?
Yeah, so a lot of what went into my decision is first off, Evalua and my boss Vishal, he called me up and said, "Hey, I have an opportunity for you." I did explain to him that, you do understand I don't know anything about marketing. You're asking me this, and he said, "That's all right. Use cases, and I'll teach you the rest." So that's really how the opportunity just sort of, we had the opportunity to connect on that. I like the opportunity because, on the other side, you were dealing with acquiring these solutions and solving these
Yeah.
problems, and something that I had done at several various points throughout my career, so I had strong informed opinions, at least I thought, at the time. So that was really, I thought I could sort of help from within on those. I think generally, when I talk to my colleagues, it's been a good thing because, Arnaud and I are in a very good position. Like he mentioned, I don't necessarily try to sell people software. I'm more interested in talking about the use case, the needs, the pain points. What are they seeing? What are we seeing? We get the opportunity to bring that back. And of course, we address it in sales content. But as Arnaud pointed out, the fun of it is going back and talking to R&D and saying, this is what we're seeing in the market. How can we help this? So I think it's generally been, something that's great. When I talk to my friends that are still in procurement, they say, what are you seeing out there when you talk to other customers? Because now I have a broader reach in other industries. Or they might say, hey, I'm seeing this, or I'm being told this as far as a technical trend.
Yeah.
What do you think on it? So it's a great way to share information. I think we're as close as we always are. When you forge those bonds in the trenches with the shared blood that was
Yes.
shed through all those years of procurement, I think it's a good relationship to have on it. But again, I always very clear with my friends is I'm not here to sell you. I'm just one of those guys who likes to geek out about solutions. But
Yeah.
in the end, if you really like what I have to say, I'll be happy to sell you something too.
Yeah.
On those. So that's how I try to address it. But it's been really positive. The procurement community as you probably know, it's a tight knit community. And after the last 3 or 4 years, it's only got tighter. So.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it's interesting in particular going into a marketing focused role. I mean, one of the things I do still in my heart consider myself a procurement person, even though I'm not a practitioner anymore, but you can still hear things the way you would have heard them when you were in that role.
Right.
And I'd be curious, Jarrod, from your perspective, coming in sort of fresh to marketing, but with that procurement background, what were maybe some of the things that you did differently in terms of communication style, or even things that, you talked about, I'm not here to sell you something. Are there ways that conventional marketing would maybe have something be said where you say, oh no, this is definitely not going to work if procurement is the target?
Yeah, I'll sort of take you back to the dark times on the dark side. When the software solutions made the switch from on-premises to SaaS,
Yep.
there was the big marketing push, and you probably saw it, where they came out and they told all of us in procurement as part of the sales pitch, you're not special. You over customize everything. Let us sell you something. You need to stick to out of the box. And, I understand why you did it when you're moving to that type of model, and there were the benefits for us. But, when you're in your procurement and you have people telling your boss you're not special, they've over customizing it, you make it too complicated. It made the job hard. And, nobody likes to hear they're not special. So there was some real challenges when I was on the other side and we're facing the market to say, no, really, really what I'm doing here is sort of special. Yes, the way we do it, this is our differentiator, this is how we run the business. And it was sort of those things that sort of left a bad taste in my mouth when I was on the other side. So, what I try to do is when I come on this side is just try to speak honestly. Is the last thing procurement wants to hear is they're not experts in their job, because, they are. And we need to relate to them in a way where we're not trying to do something to them. We're trying to do something with them. On that front. And there always was that push. Some of the worst interactions I've ever had with systems, where somebody would come in, we would be going through the process. They would say, can I have your spend file? Which is like, great, help me work on this. And then the next thing you'd present to my boss, well, you have $500 million to spend. You should be able to save $50 million. It's $10 million off the top. And, then you'd have this business case that was sort of outside of it. And then now I'm working to explain why that's not true. This only happens if I've never touched the spend. That's not what it's about. So this more, relationship that, hey, we've been doing stuff for a long time. Business has been going on. It's really about what can we do to improve it. Again, I'm not doing something to you. I want to do something with you. And that's what I try to take in. And when I talk, speak honestly about this is, how can I make what you do better? Or how can I maybe coach you on, yeah, you are special, but some of this stuff doesn't, necessarily make sense. Can you explain it to me? Maybe we can work it out together. Because I understand that time from going on-prem to the cloud, it was a definite need to push some of that messaging. But man, did it rile me up. On it, you wouldn't tell your kids they weren't special, and at that time in my life, I was spending a lot more time in my job than I was getting to see my kids during the waking hours a lot of times. So you didn't want to hear those type of things either. So I try to approach it that way, really understand what they're doing, really understand the pain point we're trying to solve, and make it as collaborative as possible.
Yeah.
And I think a difference we can make in our position in product marketing as former practitioners is this kind of advisory, because as Jarrod said, we have this experience we had in the past, which we can use to relate to the customers. We can discuss upon this with the customers. We can directly discuss with their own language and onto their own topic and challenges. Plus, we have this broad range of other customers we have access to and can share best practices, ideas, what we've seen. And so when we do marketing, we don't just, copy and paste things we've seen, or we don't copy and paste like hollow concepts. We really speak the language of an everyday basis job of a buyer or anybody in procurement.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's an excellent point that even though procurement is definitely special, I will make that official, procurement is not one monolith. There are a lot of different groups, different industries. Jarrod, you mentioned public sector procurement. That is in some ways very different from private sector, and in some ways it's exactly the same.
Right.
Arnaud, you shared a great story. I'm actually going to be, I think, thinking about those two ladies for the rest of the afternoon. The Japanese woman who doesn't want to put a contract in place because culturally, that's almost a signal that something's gone awry, versus
Yeah.
the American woman, I think you said, that was ready to drag her mother into court. I think we'll maybe try to find a middle path in there. But every person, every organization has different objectives, a different style, a different way of working. Even by category of spend, things could be a little bit different. Arnaud, how is it that you try to, obviously there's a central theme that has to get through in any messaging, but how do you try to keep that sensitivity so that whether it's public, private, litigious, not litigious, marketing services versus something that's very tangible like components for manufacturing, how do you make sure that some of that variety and sensitivity to difference comes through in the messaging, ultimately to improve your ability to be heard?
So I think it's by having like different layers in the messaging. So
Mm.
you have like the overarching message, which is a bit like more global, a bit more general, and then you have sub messages which address a certain type of spend, like external workforce, for instance, or a certain industry, like the manufacturing industry. So it's by having these different layers, and then you have different contents, because like cost optimization or spend optimization, that's a global theme for everybody in procurement, right? And but then the way you address it, it's different in manufacturing as well, the way you would do it in financial services, because in financial services, maybe your number one category of spend is IT or external workforce, whereas in manufacturing will be your direct material. So that's the way we address, both like the very general and common themes and the very specific ones.
Yeah, no, and I think that's something that even procurement, back there on the light side, can learn. I mean, people have used examples where, for instance, you might go into somebody buying components and talk very specifically about specifications, but savings figures. Whereas you try that once with marketing. Like, seriously, go into marketing and start talking about cost savings, especially if agency spend is in question. You see people's faces turn off, right? And so procurement does have some sense of marketing. There's a little bit of dark side already in place over there. Um, Jarrod, I'd be interested in your point of view about how this perspective comes into play between public and private sector. Is there that same type of mindset among the public sector groups that you work with, that being at a provider is the dark side, or is it a little bit less distance because they maybe don't have the same commercial objectives as a private sector company would have?
Yeah, what I like most about our public sector customers and talking to public sector prospects is, they have the unique capability of, they're very honest, they're very open because it's not personal.
Yep.
They take very seriously when they're the stewards of public funds, and they're going to act vigorously and selfishly to the benefit of their stakeholders, and they'll tell you that. So they'll be very, very honest with you. There's not a lot of time. I won't say it's a cat and mouse game, but as you go through some of the others, it's a business deal for them. They're very driven on the fact that they want ultimate transparency. They want to get the best value for their dollar. Savings doesn't come into the same type of thought process, because it's about value for the dollar, because you don't give tax money back. You deliver, you take the amount of tax money and you try to increase the value you're driving to that. So they're very honest. And then they also have the unique aspect of public sector procurement people. They talk to each other, and they talk about everything. So there's no interaction that you're having with someone that is not going to get communicated to someone else. They're very close, which is great 99% of the time, because you leverage the knowledge of the collective. But you have to also wonder too, is make sure that you don't give that bad advice or that selfish advice, or you don't have that focus on the customer's pain points, because other people will hear about it. And that's what I really like. And Ivalua has that right culture for us. I mean, if we've talked before, and you've probably seen a lot of our material. One of the things we're most proud about is our first customer is still our customer 25 years later. And, that's what we're really focused on. And that's the culture that, David and the executive team drive is we're all about acquiring partners for the long term on this. So treat them like family. So it gives us that ability to make sure that we're addressing constantly their needs. We can step back. We have that flexibility. We don't necessarily have that that driving pressure. It's not sales at all costs, because again, it's always a strategic focus on that. So we really do appreciate it. It takes a lot of the stress out of a conversation, for that.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, because when you think about all of the things that have changed in procurement and the things that continue to change, Jarrod, you referred to the transition from on-prem to SaaS. That was huge. And now as we go through incorporating AI, something that Ivalua has been very forward on and very invested in, I'm getting a similar feeling. I don't know if you guys have the same read, but it's not just a technical change in terms of how things work or how our UI looks. It requires accompanying thought process change to sort of figure out where it's going to be baked in. And so as we go through, and there's going to be some other change, I won't even attempt to guess what it will be, but after AI becomes old hat and we've all absorbed it, there will be some other thing that's a future change. And I think being able to see both sides, whether you happen to be sitting in public sector or private, or even within different roles within the private sector. Now, when we think about the difference between what you do today and what you used to do, Jarrod, maybe I'll put this to you first. If you could look back in time and everything you know now, give your procurement practitioner self a piece of advice, a tip, something that might surprise him, what would you actually go back? If you could time travel, what would you go back and offer up?
Yeah, I would go back and offer up, because you could probably tell I have some of the scars on the, from the on-prem to the SaaS, is really to go back and coach myself that word customization, that all of a sudden became a very dirty word.
Yeah.
At the time. It's not as bad as you think. And, there was an opportunity to, more stand your ground on, what's important. That, because there was some hard knocks, when you go from a heavily customized solution to a practically out of the box solution, it's not the best. It's not the best project implementation. And if you're in procurement, you don't get that chance too often. So I would have coached myself then, you really need to look for a partner and a software provider who understands that, yes, guide me, but don't do my job for me when it comes to these type of items on that. Because I think I would have had, much smoother transitions, greater adoptions on those. And I understand it was a change in the market, but customization did not have to be a dirty word. And then that didn't have to bleed over to configuration being a dirty word. There's an opportunity to right size that. So if I could go back and put my hands around younger Jarrod's throat and give him a little shake and say, stand your ground on what's important, because, you guys have built up this level of knowledge over the years. And if you don't have a partner that recognizes that, then they're not a partner.
Yeah. Now, Arnaud, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'm going to give you a caveat first. So you talked about the fact that you made the shift about 5 years ago. So we're looking back 2018, 2019-ish as you're making the change. Here's what you can't tell 5 years ago, Arnaud. You can't tell them there's a pandemic coming. You can't tell them, go buy gloves, take your vacations now, pick up masks, get hand sanitizer. Oh, and of course, stock up on toilet paper. You're not allowed to give that advice. We got to confine this to the realm of direct procurement. But if you could go back and give yourself some advice based on what you've since experienced and learned and seen, what would you go back and share?
I would say go and see others and other practitioners around, see what they do. And when I say share more practices with other procurement people from the community, interest yourself a bit more into also the world of technology providers like Ivalua, to understand exactly what they do, what they provide, talk to their customers to understand what they did, what they achieved. And because in my previous experience, when I was in procurement, not all the chief procurement officers have the same aspirations and visions and appeal into sharing practices or wanted to be advanced in terms of technology. And so I would say even though your CPO might not be technology savvy or wanting to change things or challenge things when it comes to IT, try also to give yourself some time to look at what others do and really much take this time.
Absolutely. No, I think that's great advice. And as we start to sort of wind things down, I also want to leave some advice for listeners. When I think about the transition I made from being a procurement practitioner to being in consulting at a provider, I very clearly remember how much I cared about my clients' success. I think I worked 10 times harder for my clients than I ever did for myself or for my team as a practitioner. And maybe that's on me. Maybe it was too early in my career and I hadn't figured out yet how hard you really have to work. But I think it's always given me a sense of we don't want it to be adversarial, whether we're talking about a sourcing project and we're picking a supplier there, or it's a procurement solution or a service provider and we're building a relationship there. I think a lot of procurement professionals might be surprised just how much their suppliers of all kinds care truly about their success. And so maybe one last quick round. Arnaud, if you can share something that procurement practitioners might be surprised to know about what goes on at a company like Ivalua that demonstrates, we're here talking about love, that demonstrates just how much Ivalua cares about their success. And then when you're done with that, what is the best way for people to get in touch if they're interested in connecting with you and continuing the conversation?
So I think there is one thing which is one of our values is obviously customer centric. That's one thing. Everybody puts this on these values, but what we do is live by this value. And anytime you talk to somebody in our company, they are not far away from the customer. We talk to customers on a regular basis. The project team talk to customers on a regular basis. The R&D team talks to the customers on a regular basis. So we're not such a huge company with so many layers that you have half of the company not talking to the customers or not having access to the customers. And I think that makes our difference. And that's why we live by this value that we have as customer centric.
Yeah. And Jarrod, same question to you. What would be something that might surprise people about what goes on? I know we're all distributed and there's a lot that's virtual now, but within the four rhetorical walls of Ivalua, what might practitioners be surprised to know?
Yeah, I think they might be surprised to know is we know their names. We know who even at Arnaud and I's level, we know who the champions are or the people who are implementing us or who picked us. And we're very invested in their success on these two. We understand that, they made an investment to us that also reflects on them. Mm-hmm. So, when we talk about these, when I go have the opportunity to talk to R&D, at first it surprised me to know when I'd bring up a customer, R&D would quote them by name. Like they knew who our point of contact there was, or who the CPO was, which was something that was a little bit shocking. Now it's just normal. Yeah. Now I don't even need to mention the company. If I need to talk to Arnaud or I need to talk to my R&D team or I need to talk to solution consultants, sometimes I can just call up and say, I spoke to so-and-so. And they'd say, oh, okay, what's going on now? And say, yeah, well, we have this use case. What do we think on these type of things? So we're really invested within that customer-centric attitude, like Arnaud mentioned, is making sure the people who picked us, we're invested in a relationship. Mm-hmm. We're invested in making sure our customers as a company are successful, but also the individuals. On these, because we do want to build up that sense of trust within our customers, but also in procurement in general. So when they do have the opportunity to talk, they could say, we're honest, and we're committed to having a customer that our first customer being our last customer, ever on this. So that's our goal.
And maybe it's also because, people tend to remain some time within the company. I've been here for 5 years, for instance. You have many people in my case, even more, like 10 years, 20 years. And so, and even at the customers, the relationship with the same people that remain at the customers. And so we have this relationship which is standing long, and that creates a real relationship and a long-standing relationship.
Absolutely.
I'll give you a good example, Kelly. This is one Arnaud will probably even recognize. So, we had a point of contact at one of our customers. We really loved interacting with him. We knew him by first name, and he moved on for a different opportunity. And it was a collective, oh, we're so sad.
Yeah.
But now at his new opportunity, we saw he's coming to our annual event. So it was like a collective group chat.
It's like old home week.
Yeah, it's like we get in a big group chat and you're like, guess who's coming? You're like, can't wait to see him, hear about what's going on. So, that's just sort of one of the manifestations that, on our relationship driven on there, that, even though he's gone and, to see him again, it's like, oh, old home week here, we can't wait to, hear what you've been up to.
And I think last thing, I think we are kind of lovable people, likable people. And one thing is, we had our last event and we had an after party, and people remained after the professional event at the after party, and they like to just have fun with us, be on the dance floor with us. And you don't just do this with all your providers, right? So I think that's also something people might not know. We are nice people to work with, but also to have fun with.
Well, and I will validate that.
Darksiders, so.
Maybe it's because I can't be objective. I think you're both incredibly fun to work with.
Well,
I also think you're both special. And thank you so much for sharing, honestly, your perspective on this. I do think this is an important thing for everyone in procurement to know, because we all either succeed together or don't. And so it is those relationships that ultimately make the difference in the hard times, in the good times. And as a community in all of our different roles, we really are working towards the same objective. So Arnaud, Jarrod, thank you both for being with me. Thank you for sharing your perspective. Thank you, everybody who's either listened in or is watching this video on the internet or on YouTube. Do not sue your mother. But of course, tune back in another couple of weeks for the next episode of the Love Procurement Podcast.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.